Hello. I want to explain a few things and just give them some sort of idea of what we've done in the past with our children. And I thought this was a great idea, and it was as we had used it when they were younger. What we did was we used, poker chips, but we didn't call them that. We called them chore chips. So as the kids would do their chores or do other things to help around the house and extra, we would give them chips, and we call them chore chips. And I have written down here, I've kept this from years past. So like the white and blue chips were valued at $1. The green chips were valued at $2. The red chips were valued at $5. And the blue chips were valued at $10. And the black chips were valued at $25, if ever turned out to be the case. So they could exchange these for different increments of chips. If they got so many smaller ones, they could exchange them for larger ones, and so on and so forth. So how these worked was if they held on to them, and then when we would go to the store or anything else that took currency, and they wanted to purchase something, or some sort of, if it's a movie theater or a grocery store or any other kind of shopping store, they wanted to purchase something there, they would say, we got these chips. They would have a list or bring them, and then we would purchase something in the value of their chips. And then once they got their item or their service, or wherever it may be, then we took the chips and we got them out of their hands because they no longer had them because they've spent them. We spent them, and so we converted them into cash to spend them for the item they wanted. We really didn't do the exchange. We spent the money ourselves in place of how much value their chip was at. So, for an example, this was a $25 chore chip, and I'm gonna need my reference for this. Our blue was a $10 chore chip. Red was a $5 chore chip. The green was a $2 chore chip, and the blue and white was a $1 chore chip. So they could save these and build them up. And like I said, if they wanted a large purchase, they would save them. If they saved so many blue ones or red ones, they could exchange those for a black one, which is a value of $25. And as time went past and they did more chores or more stuff to help out, then they would build up like that until they had spent it. So this worked for years, and they were happy with it, and there was no need to hold cash or change, that kind of stuff. And my whole thing about this is just to show you how they had confidence in these chips, these chore chips. So they recognized these as having purchasing power, value. And this went on for years. Until they got, older, of course, and that no longer was valid. But anyways, so my whole deal was, this didn't happen, but I just think, imagine what would have happened if they worked hard for these chore chips, and they have accumulated so much, and so much that had value and purchasing power. And then we decided just to start giving them out to their cousins or their friends that came over for nothing. What would happen? I'm guessing would happen in any other fiat currency situation is they would start to lose confidence that those chore chips are going to have the value that we put on them, because we're not going to go and hold that as a higher regard as value, then they won't, because they've been given to kids and cousins that did nothing for them, and they don't recognize them, the cousins or the friends, as having that value because they didn't put their work in. They didn't put their labor into getting them, to earning them. So that's one element of that. And another element is what would happen if we'll say one of their cousins or friends decided to have their parents buy a whole set of these chore chips, and they were the exact same as what we had, and then they just start giving them to our kids when they were younger if they found out that they were using these chore chips. This wasn't a case, but I'm just trying to think what would have happened. Well, all of a sudden we find out that our children all of a sudden have a stack of these chore chips, and we know they didn't earn them, and they're wanting to spend them. But my wife and I, as being the overseer of this whole deal, know that, but well, neither of our kids earned, 100 of those $25 chore chips. We would say, well, no, we know that's not the case. We know you didn't earn that. We know we didn't give those to you. How did you get this? And then from there, that would have caused a whole another big aspect of this. And then from there, the confidence of those chore chips would have been lost because my wife and I would no longer recognize those as having purchasing power or value. So in that same sense, our children would no longer recognize those as having value purchasing power because they couldn't purchase anything, because we would have seen there was some sort of fraud, some sort of, something wrong, some sort of counterfeiting happening to that, some sort of way they got these chips without them being earned and without labor being put into them. All of a sudden the whole thing would fall apart. We would not have recognized, well, yes, we understand you have this much value because we kept a record of that. We wouldn't have kept a record of that. And they wouldn't have kept a record of that because all of a sudden they came into all these new ones that they got for free because one of their cousins or friends purchased a whole set of these and just gave them a whole bunch. That would have wrecked the whole system, the whole deal that we did with these chore chips. And because of that, confidence would have been lost overall, and they would have become worthless. They weren't worthless at the time because everyone had held a value on these. Everyone had confidence in them. Everyone, as my wife and I and our children. But once that counterfeiting or that duplication or whatever you want to call it happened, all of a sudden the whole system just broke and fell apart, and there was no going back. That didn't happen, thankfully. But I'm just trying to use this as an example as to what would happen or what could happen with what I believe is going to happen with the US dollar, the fiat currency we have at the US dollar, because other countries aren't just making this and printing this, like I talked about a cousin or a friend getting more of these chore chips or purchasing more to give. The Federal Reserve is printing and duplicating and putting digits on a screen that is doubling, tripling how much currency is out there, whether that is paper currency or it's just digits in bank accounts or digits that exist anywhere else in people's wallets or loans or whatever it may be. All these extra digits, this counterfeiting, this duplication that is being done over and over is sort of the same sense of, because that stuff wasn't earned, they just duplicate it, they put digits, they call it quantitative easing or something else, and they give them to the banks. The banks will, and the politicians get so many people on top, get what they want of that cut. And then from there, they're supposed to spread it out. We'll spread it out by loaning and whatever else that may be, but as they're making more and more of these, the value of what already existed is losing. It's losing purchasing power. It's losing what it once had. So but it's sort of the same circumstance. I'm talking about the chore chips. It won't crash and burn as fast as what would have happened with the chore chips if someone, the cousin or the friend, would have bought the same set and just gave, our children a whole bunch. If they did that slowly, we might not have found out right away, but then over time, we would have got smart to that. It didn't happen like that. It didn't happen at all, thankfully, but what's happening in the country, and as we know, the US dollar, the fiat currency, is the same sort of scenario. And because of that, what happens is hyperinflation is the breaking point. Well, we got all these years of inflation that lead up to that from 1913 to the current day. That's why the dollar purchasing power is, in 1913, the dollar was valued to $1. It was valued in gold. It had a value of $1. Today, the purchasing power of $1 is roughly, I think it's 2 to 3 cents is what the purchasing power can purchase versus what it could have in 1913. So that's what inflation is. That's how it wrecks economies. That's how it takes money out of yours and my bank accounts, yours and my purchasing power goes down over time. So the Fed and the government say, well, a 2% inflation rate yearly is a good thing to have, and that is absolutely false. If you think about it, a 10-year span, 2% inflation rate, that's 10%, that's a 10-year span, that's 20%. So you've lost 20% purchasing power in that little scope of time. So what you could have purchased 10 years ago versus today is 20% less. And then another 10 years go by, then that's even 20% less than the 10 years prior. That's just the way it adds up and goes. So it's a hidden tax that you really don't feel or see or have any sort of bad resolve for until hyperinflation hits. And once the system's broken, it's fast and there's a lot of pain. Those on top, those who have been the first ones to get that freshly created currency, the new digits, the new printing of the dollar, whatever it may be, are the ones who get the purchasing power at that time, as soon as it was printed. But as it spreads out throughout the society, it's losing that purchasing power over time. And then at the end, you and I and most of society, whatever that's 90%, 95%, 98%, 99%, are the ones that feel the loss of their purchasing power and the loss of their wealth as this inflation and hyperinflation hits and runs amok and destroys the system as we have once known and been accustomed to and been forced to be in. There's nothing out there that says it's legal to purchase with anything other than the US dollar in America. That's for taxes, that's for everything. The stores, that's recognized and it is enforced. So it's for all debts, all debts, legal and private, private and public. So you can't pay your taxes with silver or gold or anything else. You can't go to anywhere else and pay with silver or gold. You can exchange and trade in a sort of circumstance of a swap meet, possibly, if it's a smaller one and it's unregulated. But even, for example, on the show Pawn Stars, if you're familiar with that, if you see on there, a gentleman years ago brought an old car in, and he wanted gold for it. So he wanted to sell his old car for gold. And Rick, I believe his name is, said, "I can't give you gold for the car. What I have to do is I will tell you how much I'm going to buy this car for. I'll give you your fiat currency, your cash, and I'll hand that to you. Then you hand that back to me, and then I'll give you the gold and the value of the cash you handed to me." That's just legally what he had to do. He couldn't say, "I'll take that car in exchange for this much gold, this much value of gold." He couldn't legally do that because of the laws we have in place of this fiat currency, this US dollar. He had to give the gentleman paper money, cash, US dollar, and then a second later, the gentleman gave Rick that cash for how much gold it was able to purchase with it, which equated to the value of the car that was set in their exchange. So I'm trying to make this clear and simple. I will try to make another video that it's a little more elementary, for lack of a better term. I'm trying to simplify inflation the best I can to make it easy for everyone to understand, and children even. So until next time, thank you for watching. I should say, until next time, preserve your health, preserve your wealth, and stay vigilant.